Good evening and welcome to the latest of our Zoom talks with local farmers and producers under our Long Island Grown banner. For those of you who don't know, I'm Yvette Salsedo. I'm with the Peconic Land Trust, and I'll be the host for tonight's program, which features 3 dynamic and innovative local farmers who will reflect back on the 2020 growing season. Layton Guenther from Quail Hill Farm, Chris Browder, Browder's Birds, and Will Lee of Sangley Farm. And Laura Donnelly joins us again as the moderator for our Long Island Grown, as we were just chattering about a little bit ago, which we've been hosting at the Trust Bridge Garden since 2014. We hope to be able to return in person soon, but we're also going to try to figure out how to meld that in person with the Zoom, because it's been great to have so many people be able to join us over the course of the season. So right now, I'd like to thank Layton, Chris, Will, and Laura for taking the time joining us and for the wonderful work you are doing to feed and nourish our communities. We're so glad, as I mentioned before, that so many people have been able to join us this evening, and many of you who are returning, over the course of the season. So thank you. I hope everyone is doing well and staying safe and healthy. And from all of us at the Trust, we wish you the best and are grateful that you're spending a little time with us this evening. And I always like to give a little shout out to Kathy Kennedy, who is our Senior Manager of Outreach. Kathy has been working with Laura and our Bridge Gardens Director, Rick Bogish, on this Long Island Grown series for many, many years. And it's been great. And so we love her enthusiasm, energy, and creativity as it comes to pulling these panels together. And then, as I mentioned on a housekeeping note, you're muted during the conversation, but at the end, we'll be answering questions from the audience. So please use the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen to be able to post a question. And we'll try to answer those, as many of those as possible. The chat function is also not working between participants, but if you need to use chat to send me a note if there's any issues that you're having relative to the technology, and I'll try to address those and fix those. So before I turn it over, a little bit on the Peconic Land Trust. As you may know, the Trust was founded in 1983 with a mission to conserve Long Island's working farms, natural lands, and heritage. And with your help, as well as the support of thousands of individuals, partner organizations, foundations, community groups, and all levels of government, we've been able to accomplish a lot. It is with your support that we've been able to protect over 13,000 acres of land, including over 6,000 acres of farmland, that is available to farmers growing food and many other agricultural products. The Trust work with the farming community is varied, from land protection to leasing and training programs, and also shining a light on the work of the local farmers and their importance to our community through these types of programs. So tonight we'll hear a few of their stories. And now I'd like to introduce our moderator and friend of the Trust, with a big thank you to her, Laura Donnelly. Laura is a local pastry chef, food editor of the East Hampton Star, and for the 7th year in a row, our moderator for the Long Island Grown series. So with that, I'll turn it over to Laura and to Chris, Layton, and Will, and looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you, Yvette. And thank you, Chris and Layton and Will, for joining us. I don't want you to worry too much about the deep freeze tonight. Don't want you running out in the middle of this panel worrying about chickens and broccoli and everything else. I want to thank everybody for joining us, also the audience. And this isn't the same as doing it at Bridge Gardens, which is, very communal, and we share food and wine afterwards, and you get to talk to people. But doing it by Zoom, we can invite more people to join us. So that's a great aspect. And basically, the first question I want to ask everybody, excuse me. First of all, I want everybody to tell people a little bit about themselves, but the gist of this panel will be the impact of the pandemic as it unfolded, starting in spring, going through the summer, and now entering the fall, what it has been like for you guys. And I would just like to begin with a quote that I read that Layton said recently. You compared running the farm through the compound challenges of a pandemic, a labor shortage, and fluctuating demand to being underwater in a wave. Eventually, I will come up. And in the meantime, I don't know what is up and what is down.
That's great.
So, I'm just going to go in order through the screen because it's easier. Chris, could you introduce yourself, tell us what you do, and tell us what the impact has been this summer of what is going on?
Okay, well, first of all, I could talk for hours on the impact of the pandemic on our business this year, but I'll give you a brief synopsis, if you will, when we get to it. But just a little background for those of you who don't know me. My name is Chris Browder. My wife Holly and I own Browder's Birds, located in Mattituck. We have a 20-acre farm. It's mostly pasture. And we are a pasture poultry farm. We're also certified organic. And we raise meat chickens, egg chickens. We raise ducks. We have a flock of Cotswold sheep that we raise for wool. And we raise turkeys for Thanksgiving. We're sold out. Thank you very much. And then we also have honeybees on our property that we, obviously use for honey. And so that's we're sort of a diversified livestock farm. Everything is pasture raised, and everything is rotationally grazed on a regular basis. So we started this farm in 2010. So this is my 12th year of farming. And I guess the best way to describe it is one last thing I wanted to mention about my background is that, first of all, this is my second career. I was in finance before this in the city, and I worked there for almost 20 years. And so I've been almost 12 years now farming. And that is a long story about how that transpired. But suffice it to say, it was something, a move of passion, if you will, as opposed to something that I just did in the past. Finance was great, but the culture was toxic. And so I feel much better about the culture that I'm living in now. Let's see, I guess that's a last thing I wanted to mention too is the land trust. Just a little shout out to them. I started farming in 2010. I had worked for a year as an apprentice at another farm, and I went to the land trust and I said I wanted to start a pasture poultry farm. And the group there was very helpful. I put together a business plan. We went out and we looked at a few different places that we possibly could rent. And we ended up at Charnoose in Southold at the farms, Farms for the Future initiative. I think I was one of the first farmers in that group. And we farmed at Charnoose for 4 years before we ended up buying the farm that we are farming at now in Mattituck. And I think I was the first graduate of the Farms for the Future initiative, that the land trust had there. So it was great because I was able to lease land, minimal amount of capital that I had to raise, put out to figure out if this is something I wanted to do or something I could figure out to do. And it was a good stepping stone that allowed me to get to where we are today.
Excellent. Layton?
One last thing.
Sorry, Chris.
I'll get to the whole pandemic stuff later. I mean, it's just,
okay.
It's a lot.
Layton?
So, thank you so much, Laura, for moderating, and thanks, Chris and Will, also for being here. I know it's a fraught time to be a farmer, especially tonight with the first killing freeze that we were just talking about before the program started. So I'll just give a brief intro for those of you who don't know me. My name is Layton Guenther, and I am the director of Quail Hill Farm, which is a stewardship project of the Land Trust. So I'm also a part of the big happy family. Quail Farm we're in our 31st year of community farming here in Amagansett. We run a 35-acre non-certified organic practicing farm, mixed vegetables and cut flowers here on the South Fork. We have one of the oldest CSAs in New York State that is almost entirely pick your own. So it's a very unique version of CSA farming in the sense that most of our members are coming to the farm twice a week. I've been with the trust. I've been at Quail Hill with the trust since 2013. I was the farm manager for, I want to say like 6 or 7 years. with my mentor, the founding farmer, Scott Chasky. And this is my first full season as the director of the project. So I'm new in my role, but, you know, kind of old hat to the operation. And the pandemic has just like, well, you know, it's funny you read that quote, Laura, because when that was printed, I got, you know, so many farmer friends texting me and saying like, man, I totally feel you. Like, I feel like I can't breathe either. And I'm like, it's not like, you know, it's not like we're drowning here, but like, yeah, you don't know what is heads and tails when basically the regular seasonality to our markets and the demand for our produce totally went out the window. You know, we were getting cold calls from people as early as March when a lot of people with second homes on the South Fork were moving their families out here to get out of New York City. And the demand on food, like the strain on the food system here was really, all you had to do was go to the local IGA to see that things were pretty taxed there. So in an interesting twist, I think a lot of our farm was no exception in the sense that I think you'll hear tonight that a lot of our farms saw an uptick in interest in our products, and we for one don't actually have like a outward facing retail setup in any way, and we weren't set up to, you know, build a farm stand by any means. And ask any vegetable farmer in March and April, you actually don't have a ton of stuff to be selling fresh out of the field in that time of year anyhow. So we more or less, you know, the quick version of it is that we sold out of our CSA shares faster than I think we have in many years. We also increased the number of people who don't come to harvest their own food, but who collect a box of pre-harvested, packaged vegetables. In one of the more traditional versions of a CSA, that increased by 150% on our end. And our normal outlets to restaurant accounts shrank dramatically because obviously the shutdown really had a huge impact on local restaurants. And we got a lot of interest from our CSA members who were concerned about families who were experiencing food insecurity on the South Fork. So due to that level of interest, we were actually able to do a fair amount of outreach to a bunch of different organizations on the South Fork that had these COVID-related food pantries that either, you know, existed before the pandemic in a much more limited form, or, you know, came out of nowhere once the shutdown occurred. We were able to connect with the Bridgehampton Child Care Center and devised a farm to food pantry program to supply their pre-existing food pantry with fresh produce for a total of, we just wrapped today, actually. Today was our last delivery to them for the season, 23 weeks. And for the better part of 18 weeks, I want to say we were going twice a week. So all told, like our revenue, or not revenue, but our distribution this season was less based on restaurant accounts and wholesale accounts and more direct to consumer through CSA and also through the food pantry partnership that we had. So I could go on. One other thing that I want to just highlight is that in terms of labor and volunteerism was really very different this year as a result of COVID. So those same people who were coming out to the East End in March and April to get out of the city, a lot of those people have, you know, college age kids or grad school age kids who, you know, their internships dried up or were unemployed because of the pandemic, or were taking a break from their career because of the pandemic. And the number of people who ended up volunteering at Quail Hill Farm this season was just totally unprecedented. Well over 1,000 hours were donated to the farm this year, both in the fields, but more in helping coordinate our CSA. We had an amazing volunteer coordinator, Emma Quaitman, who helped out for the season, and also just countless other CSA members who stepped up to the plate to help us run the CSA successfully. So those are the sort of broader brushstrokes of the pandemic's effect. And I think I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Layton. Will? A little introduction about yourself and Sangley Farm and just how this season impacted your farm.
Sure. Thanks for having us, Laura. And thank you, Yvette, for putting this all together. And thanks for Chris and Layton joining us. The season was pretty drastically different, to say the least. And I guess it all started when we sat down in March at our management meeting, which we have every week. And we asked ourselves, should we buy the same amount of seed? And should we plan on growing the same amount? And we ultimately decided that we should grow more instead of less. And that was a big decision because there was a lot of insecurity and there was a lot of indecision and there was just so much up in the air and question. And it took a lot for us to dig our heels in and have the faith and trust to lease the land, to plant the seeds, and to keep everything on track on the same timeline that we always do. So we have thousands of people who rely on us for food every week. And that's just a big amount of pressure normally, never mind when the population increases. So I'm glad that we made the choices that we did. And I'm really thankful for the land trust who provides us with the land and our other landowners who, lease us property so that we're able to farm what we can grow to feed the community. Without the land, we wouldn't be able to do what we do. And without our CSA, we wouldn't have been able to afford the seed. We would not have been able to reach into the bank and say, let's pull out tens of thousands of dollars in capital and jumpstart this season under this kind of environment. And so I have to thank the people that continue to sign up for our CSA and who continue to support what we do and how we grow things, because without them, it's hard to keep the faith when things are so volatile. There's about 16 weeks there where we have to front the labor costs to seed everything and get the fields ready and keep the greenhouses going and all the baby transplants. And without the CSA and without our landowners and our customers' support, we wouldn't be here right now. Ultimately, we had a good year. We definitely sold more than ever in jarred items. We could not make enough preserves. Obviously, everybody knows due to the state of emergency that most people were stockpiling food. Whether they were using it or not is another scenario. But the population went up. People felt the need to provide for their families, and ultimately the East End of Long Island felt an extraordinary influx from people who were moving to this part and needed sustenance. So in the back of our mind, that was part of why we knew we had to grow more. But in the same token of faith, it was challenging to source the labor, train our retail staff, who have done miraculously under extraordinarily traumatic conditions, and to get to this point where we can take a deep breath and say, wow, I can't believe no one got sick, and I can't believe we didn't have any issues, being open and dealing with the public. We took some extreme precautions, maybe more than were necessary, but we made it through it, and I have to say, pretty unscathed. So I feel thankful at this point, and whatever the world throws at us, I feel like farming will prevail because it's so necessary. So even when we have these cold nights, I know that there will be enough food, and we'll get as much as we can, and we'll just continue on, and things will keep going. So thanks for having us. And is there anything else that you'd like me to address in the opening?
Oh, no, that's good. Thank you. So just some quick questions along the same lines, because I'm curious about this myself. Even with the loss of business from restaurants, for all of you, whoever sells to restaurants, did the population explosion out here cancel that out with CSAs? And in Will, in your case, you are planting gardens for people, organic gardens and raised beds. And did you all notice a greater need for, okay, this is a two-part question, which gets too complicated. So basically what I'm interested in knowing is, did the farms suffer from losing restaurant business, or did it even out with the increase in the population? And just kind of quicker answers. And again, I'll go in the same direction with Chris, Layton, and Will.
Okay, well, I didn't talk about how the pandemic infected us. I'd like to do that at some point, so maybe we can do that.
Right now.
Okay. All right, so as these guys have said, I've experienced many of the same things. We had a lot of uncertainty at the beginning. I mean, it was, everyone was afraid. Everyone was very afraid. I didn't even know, were we gonna even open our farm this year? Were we even gonna do anything? Because I was concerned about, are we essential workers? Do we have to close? Okay, I found out we're essential workers, so we don't have to close, so we can stay in there. But there was so much uncertainty between the farmers market for the winter was closing because of COVID. The farmers markets we depend on in the summer were delayed opening because of COVID. Then I had all kinds of problems with the U.S. Postal Service getting chicks here. There were a couple of different times where it took over a week to get chicks here. And of course, by the time they got here in a week, they're all dead. So, we had, and then our hatchery, we had all kinds of problems with them. They sent us so many wrong orders of chicks. It's not even funny. So we had to dance around all this. We had to figure out how on earth we're going to make all this work and satisfy our CSA, which, by the way, burgeoned beyond belief. We had to shut it down early because we had such demand, and there was tremendous influx of people. So we kind of just said, okay, look at all this. What can we control in all of this? And what we decided we could control was our own farm stand and our CSA. And so what we decided to do, since everything else was closing, and normally in March and April we have a tremendous amount of inventory of eggs, and all the grocery stores were running out of eggs, we said, okay, we're going to open our farm stand every day. Before, we'd only open 2 days a week on the weekends. We're going to open our farm stand every day, and we're going to switch our model from where we have someone who basically mans the booth to a self-service situation. And I was afraid of that because I thought people might steal stuff from us. And, I just wasn't sure how that was going to happen, but we went ahead and did it anyway. And you know what? It turned out to be fantastic for 99% of the season. And so when we did that, we were able to just unload all of our eggs very quickly in March and April. And for the rest of the season, our CSA was going and our farmers market started open. So once everything started going with this influx of people that came in from the city and other places, the demand was off the charts for eggs, for chickens, for everything. And we ended up selling out of chickens in October this year. Last year, we went all the way to March still having chickens. So, that's how, and it was basically the same amount we did both years. So that can give you an indication of just how much demand there was for what we were doing. Mm-hmm. And it was a great thing for us to, get the farm stand open every day on a self-service basis. And, and I will say this, we didn't really have any theft that I was concerned about until recently. And then within the last couple of weeks, we've had a fair amount of theft. So we ended up closing our farm stand, even though we're already sold out of pretty much everything we have. but we'll open it again for Thanksgiving, with our turkeys and giving them out and all that sort of stuff. But it is interesting how that sort of like came on at the end of the season. I think that's
And-
all I have on that front.
Right. Well, and
And as far
for-
as restaurants go, I'll just say, as you can imagine, yes, we decreased our sales to restaurants, but everything else that we were doing took that up and in spades, so it really wasn't a problem at all.
so a little silver lining there.
Yes.
And Layton?
You. Yeah, so let me first just say that the restaurants that we work with are some of the most amazing people. We have some great relationships with the restaurant accounts that we work with. Until this year, actually, we had restaurant supported agriculture accounts with a few of them, with chefs who were, basically agreeing to take 5 to 7 types of items from us weekly, and like a set amount that they were willing to spend, and just having that level of trust and that kind of relationship with our partner restaurants has been huge, and it has been really, really this year it took a hit, and I really feel for everybody who's in the restaurant and food business, especially nowadays. I will also say that our restaurant accounts and our wholesale and farmers market sales only really account for about 15% of our income from year to year. So, it's not a huge portion of our budget. It's significant, but not huge. I will say that when we sort of saw the writing on the wall with those accounts drying up when the shutdown happened, we immediately started pivoting to think, right, like pivot is the word of 2020, right? So like, okay, well, where we already bought, unlike Will's farm, like we had already bought all of our seed in March. And so we're saying, okay, well, we already spent all this money. Like, how are we gonna make this work? We're already, our crop plans are already done. We know what we're gonna grow more or less. So how do we make sure that this food isn't wasted and in fact gets to the people who need it? And another function of being a stewardship project of the Land Trust is that we're a not-for-profit. The trust itself is a not-for-profit. And so we were uniquely positioned to actually, when we decided to establish this, we're able to establish this partnership with the food pantry at the Bridgehampton Child Care Center. We were able to leverage a donation from some farm members who were concerned about food insecurity on the South Fork at that time, to apply for a grant through AFTI, which is All for the East End, a foundation that was sort of revived in COVID times to provide much needed monetary resources for food pantries in all 5 of the East End towns. So we were able to apply for a grant to AFTI and then raise private donations to fund this farm to food pantry program. So that is just to say that it functioned more or less to plug the hole more or less where the restaurant accounts, where we saw that those accounts were going to fall short this year, and also ensured that all of the food that we were planning to grow and had intention to grow was able to get out the door and into the homes of the people who need it. So I think that's what I would say about restaurants. Did I finish answering your question, Laura?
Yes, no, that's excellent. Thank
Okay,
you.
cool.
Will, how about you?
In regard to the restaurant accounts, we do a very small percentage wholesale. We're most dominantly direct to consumer and retail oriented. We originally farmed strictly wholesale truck farming, and due to a lot of factors in the marketplace, including North American Free Trade Agreement and the prevalence of shipping distributors and size of the containers and the trucks and the Hunts Point market, we're unable to compete within the world market, or at least the North American global market. And being that we provide strictly for the local community, now being that the local community had an influx in population, we essentially just saw an increase in demand. So immediately the CSA and the home delivery CSA saw an enormous increase. We had a giant waiting list, to say the least. We had to shut the door and hold on to our hat because we were worried that we didn't have enough crops planted. We didn't have enough, transplant plug trays of 128 cell lettuce put in the ground to supply people with some of the simplest items. And, being that the CSA had an uptick and the retail was as busy as it was, as long as we could keep, the doors open and figure out how to manage people in and out of our storefront, which we did have to close for some time, just due to risk. We found a way through the marketplace without seeing, a downturn in sales. So the restaurants, unfortunately, had a difficult time, especially in the spring and even still now. But that didn't really affect our business model.
Will, I also understand that you have been offering a service of building organic gardens and raised beds for people on their own properties, and that completely sold out. And ready?
Right. So as the other two panelists can probably attest to, there are only so many people who are skilled to do farm work and have the professional knowledge to handle specialty food or vegetables. Handling produce safely is like a multi-year training circumstance. In order to do it properly and have the skill set to understand a diversity of crops takes a multitude of years to get under your belt. So I'm only able to take on so many garden accounts, and I'm only able to help so many people with their raised beds. And I wish I could do more, but we are looking to build that sector of the business. Something like this, when it happens, it raises the the demand for people to have food close to home, to have local choices, or to grow things in their own yard. And so, the demand for people to have those items like cherry tomatoes or lettuce right in their backyard or their pool area or right on their back deck was extraordinary. And we've always offered transplants to people, and it's kind of been a pretty simple evolution where a good customer will ask me, hey, can you, come over and check out my garden? So, being that I want to see people grow food, and that's part of our mission to help people and their children. We have a camp that we had to close this year. We want to see people learn the trade and understand how to grow all the different, nightshades or brassicas and things like that. And what are the insects and what are the times of the season to plant those items? Mm-hmm. So, we want to see people grow. We want to help them, but we're only so many people and we only had so many plants, and we sold out of transplants. The lumberyard sold out of wood.
Wow.
We couldn't build beds and bring them to people's houses because, organizing the supplies and having, the infrastructure to do it was not available. So not only that, but sending somebody to someone else's house in the springtime was a little bit risque, so to speak. So we exercised masks and gloves, and we did everything we could in the retail sector, and we also transitioned that type of security and that type of protocol into our garden team. But there's only so many things you can do under these circumstances. So,
also, Oh, sorry.
Did as best as we could.
I also wanted to congratulate you. People should know that Sang Lee Farm won the 2020 New York AEM Leopold Conservation Award. So I say congratulations and get back to work.
Thank you. Yeah. Days like today, that are so challenging with the frost coming and the harvest. It's nice to know that there are people that recognize, what we do, and that growing food is so important, So,
Exactly. Well,
yeah,
that's
to
very
aim-
impressive. I think Sang Lee is awesome. So Chris, I have a question for you. And I want to just get like a little bit quicker answers because we're going to open this up for the audience shortly. When people go to the markets and they're looking for a good chicken and they see terms like natural or organic or free range or air dried, I don't think, from what I understand, that these things are really regulated and they're kind of very vague terms. So do you ever have to deal with those questions with people, or can you explain what those terms mean? Free range, natural, air dried, organic, which
Right.
seems to be.
Well, yes, I have conversations with people every week about these topics. It's interesting. I feel like I'm as much of an educator as I am a farmer, and I'm educating myself too. It's like I'm not educating other people; I'm getting educated as well. But yeah, these terms are really difficult to understand what they mean. Many of them, or most of them, don't mean anything. From my understanding, and so it's hard to know what they mean. But natural really doesn't mean anything. I don't know what natural means. I have no idea. Free range, the idea being, I guess, free range is that they are running around free on land. But a lot of people say, well, free range is not that. It's they can live in be in a confined house and have a small door at the end with a small porch that they can run out to if they want to,
Porch.
and that's considered quote unquote free range. So the only term that I'm really familiar with that has bite to it is organic, certified organic.
Mhm.
That means that there are protocols that farmer has to follow, and they are audited by inspectors, and books are kept. Records have to be shown. There's a lot of transparency there. And so if you're a certified organic, in my case, a certified organic poultry provider, then that you're not, the feed doesn't have GMOs. The pasture is an organic pasture, and the chickens live on a rotationally grazed pasture outdoors. That's what it means in New York at NOFA. So,
Mhm.
those are some. If you have any air dried, okay. So there's two ways to cool a chicken. You can cool a chicken in an ice bath, or you can cool a chicken in a giant freezer. Is there any difference? I don't think so.
The weight, apparently the weight.
It's a marketing, to me it's a marketing gimmick, because
Mhm.
the weight, if you chill a chicken in a tank with ice and you drain it, there is no additional weight.
Oh.
Maybe that's what they're talking about. There's some additional weight, water weight or something like that, but it's very minimal if there's any.
Thank you. Now, Layton, quick question. I understand that you had, at the beginning of the season, some volunteers from AmeriCorps to come and work at the farm. This was in early March, and pretty much they had to do a quick turnaround and were sent home. And then you had to scramble for local volunteers, and you had a very, I guess, reduced staff.
Yeah, I can tell that story. I'll try to make it quick, although much like every twist and turn of this year, we could spend the whole hour talking about the AmeriCorps team. So I guess I would start by saying that our home farm is about 25 acres, I want to say. That was donated to the trust in the early 1990s by one Deborah Ann Light, who was this amazing conservationist, philanthropist, early member of the Peconic Land Trust Board, and somebody who, you know, from her time as a landowner in Amagansett, dating back to the 60s, was like constantly thinking about engaging with ideas around land conservation as they were snowballing into what we now think of as the land conservation movement on the South Fork. So needless to say, she was ahead of her time. So our home farm, which is, like I said, about 25 acres, we're only farming, or even actively, like, you know, traversing, I want to say even maybe a third of that, half of that. Most of it is the aforementioned Quail Hill, which is the famous sledding hill of East Hampton, and sort of spinning around the outside edge of the property. So it's quite hilly, and it's an area, a chunk of the farm that more or less has been left alone for the better part of 30 years or so. And Deborah's son, Mike, who lives in San Francisco, who's an aerial photographer and himself a supporter of the Land Trust and of Quail Hill Farm. Certainly, he actually grew up on the land at Quail Hill. Mike worked with us in the fall and winter of this past year to think about, okay, what would it take to actually do sort of an invasive species removal project, whereby we sort of take back, quote unquote, these swaths of this acreage on our home farm that has been, that now, or until this year, was more or less inaccessible. We decided to go the route of applying for an AmeriCorps team through their National Civilian Conservation Corps, NCCC is the acronym. We were awarded said team, and they were going to be with us for about 6 weeks, you know, before the ticks got bad. So we scheduled them to come early March. They were going to be with us through early April. They arrived on a Thursday, and by the following Wednesday, you know, whatever that was, like the Wednesday before, I'm calling it Black Friday, the day that everything shut down in New York City. So the 11th, let's call it, by the 11th of March, AmeriCorps teams all over the country their projects were suspended, and there were teams all over the country again were told, you know, we are going to put you on planes and we are sending you home. So for the first time in AmeriCorps' history, there was a nationwide suspension of projects. And so I guess I would just say that the work that AmeriCorps was going to do with us was not farm work per se, but it was more of a holistic sort of landscape management and invasive species removal project. We still were able to do some of that, although to a much smaller scale, because when you go from having 12 eager 18 to 22-year-olds to, you know, just a group of farmers navigating a pandemic along with everything else, you can, you know, cut corners. But at any rate, that's the short story of the AmeriCorps team. We probably will apply for another team in the future, but not this year, most likely.
So it's a good organization. So I feel like soon we should give it up for the chat and question and answer, but just one more question, because this fascinates me. Will, you are a free diver and a spear fisherman?
Yes.
And you spent a month last year in Tahiti on a pearl farm?
Yep.
And you can dive down to 150 feet?
148.
Woo! Oh my God. So are you feeling like you will be able to travel this winter when things are quiet at the farm? Are you hopeful?
I would hope, but for less time than normal.
Right.
You know, I'll be 35 next week, so my parents are in their 60s, and
Oh, that's really old.
as a mixed blessing, I have to take over more and more responsibilities here at the farm.
Mm-hmm.
I can't travel the same way I used to. When we went to Tahiti, It was under the invitation from a National Geographic photographer who grew up on the Pearl Farm and invited us to come out. And we dug soil from the primary forest on the Motu and planted a whole bunch of these buoys that had washed up from the pearl industry, and cut them in half and planted them with, baby greens and tomatoes and seed that we smuggled in to French Polynesia. So it was an amazing experience, needless to say. But yeah, spearfishing is part of the sustainable approach that I like to take living here on the North Fork. I believe strongly that the distance that your food travels is important, and it affects the nutrient content, the freshness, and the flavor, as well as your carbon footprint and the environmental influx that you have on the environment and your community. So if I jump in the water in the Long Island Sound and I shoot a striped bass or go scalloping in 54-degree water like we did on Sunday, source a meal, that may be less pressure on the world than if I buy beef from Texas or Brazil. So not only is it a hobby, but it also is a good way to put food on the table. So I do believe strongly in breathing, and I think most people who do yoga can attest to that your breath and your lungs are the largest organ in your body besides your skin, and that it's very important to take a deep breath and breathe under all these circumstances that we have. And I think that it's a great, passionate, pastime of mine that I like to incorporate into my lifestyle.
Well, be careful. I'm a mom, so you be careful. Yvette, do you want to open things up for questions? Do we do the?
Yeah, I definitely, I'll encourage it. There is one question out there, and so we'll ask that. But I encourage everybody who's out there to ask questions. And so there's a question from Joe. It says, it sounds like CSAs are extremely important to your farming efforts, and even more so during the current pandemic. Do any of you do business with food hubs in the region?
I'll start. We don't. We sell through CSA, through farmers markets, through our farm stand, and then some wholesale to restaurants if available, other farm stands, or small retailers. So we really don't do anything with food hubs.
What does food hub mean? Is that like a service, or I'm not sure I understand what food hub means.
So I want
Anybody know? Okay, Layton. Yeah.
My understanding of food hubs is that it's a way basically for growers in very rural areas where there would otherwise be a lot of resources, labor and otherwise, expended on transporting their goods into places with bigger markets. Food hubs are a way for growers to, consolidate into a single distribution chain.
Mm-hmm.
It's also a good way to, I think of food hubs also as a good way to capture some of the more diverse products that can be produced in a region. I don't think that Lancaster Farm Co-op is technically a food hub. I'm having a hard time even thinking of one in the Northeast, although.
Isn't there one in the Hudson Valley? I thought there was one there. Maybe I'm wrong.
I'm sure there is. But yeah, that's my understanding. And I feel like most of us on the East End, most of us are marketing most of our produce, in the Memorial Day to Labor Day times. And I think, those of us with farm stands, certainly Will can speak to this better than I, but I think most of our markets we're able to do direct to consumer. So I think food hubs are more pertinent when you're in, again, like maybe more of a wholesale game, or you're in more of a rural place where you need to travel a greater distance to get to your market.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think you're right. The food hub is designed for areas of the country where the distance that you have to travel in order to source 12 items. So it would be like a combination of a distributor with a co-op where everybody brings their food to a central location for sale. Probably similar to what we had here about 100 years ago with the auction blocks, when we were, bringing all the Brussels sprouts to the packing house and then sending them by rail car to New York City or something like that. But it doesn't exist anymore. I would say a grocery store is about the closest thing we have to a food hub now.
So thanks, guys. There's another question. Have sales at the farmers markets been important for your bottom line? And would you consider a CSA through the farmers market?
Anybody?
Okay.
I'll go first. Yeah, I mean, farmers markets are extremely important to us. We only do 2 in the summer, East Hampton and West Hampton Beach. And this year, East Hampton had to change locations because of the pandemic. There was not enough room in the existing location. So we changed locations. That really set us back. It set me back. It set us back. It was a really iffy year. Usually that market is quite strong for us, but there were a lot of private chefs that did not come to that market. I guess that they were probably not employed anymore with whatever families they were working with. But the West Hampton Beach Farmers Market was extremely strong this year, although it got off to a late start, but it was extremely strong. And, we're very dependent on it. We do have, our CSAs, our customers, and I know Sang Lee does this too, they're able to pick up their CSA at the farmer's market. So we do that, what you just asked about. So, if they can either come to our farm stand, they can come to either any of our farmers markets, or I guess that's it. We don't deliver. So that would be the way that we would do it.
Okay. Anybody?
Sorry, we
Well,
do provide our CSA at the farmers market for people to pick up. So that is a good location if you are not close to our main farm to source your CSA, and you can choose to pick up at multiple different locations all over Long Island for our CSA. You can see that on our website.
Yeah, and I'll just answer very quickly that sales at farmers market for us is not a huge part of our overall budget. We do the Sag Harbor Farmers Market, and we've been a part of that market for many, many years. We consider that to be a benefit to our apprentices to be able to go and learn the skills that are involved with marketing directly in a retail setting like that. Again, because we don't have a farm stand at Quail Hill Farm, and we do use that stand to drop off, to deliver CSA shares here and there, but very, very small numbers. So.
Laura, I can go with the next. So, and Layton,
I just
wanna
saw
go
a
after
good
that?
Yvette, I just saw a good one about how can an energetic and experienced young farmer be helped to achieve the ownership of a farm, either as an owner or lessee? That's a question for Peconic Land Trust.
So
Or
I'll
maybe
jump in,
one of
but
these young farmers.
well, yeah, I mean, I can, I'll just jump in quickly and say, give us a call. The Land Trust has a program called the Farms for the Future Initiative, in which we do leases, but we also work with farmers to think about ownership, obviously, of farms. And it was one thing, obviously, Chris was in the program as a lessor and a lessee, and also we the home farm now that he owns was purchased through the Land Trust. So we've done that on a few occasions, and so yeah, give us a call. And Layton maybe wants to talk about it a little bit, but Will and Sang Lee also they lease land from the land trust, but we have an incubator program where people can get started in farming. And that's, so small acreage allows people to get experience and understand all the implications of growing food and doing that as for a living. And we offer mentorship programs, and that's both with staff as well as Will's father, Fred. Early on, when we first started the Farms for the Future initiative, was really very provided a lot of guidance for farmers. So we do connect people to traditional farmers and experienced farmers and people who have been established here on Long Island to provide information and guidance as they move forward. Layton, you may want to jump in there.
Yeah, I will just say that I think there are as many types of farms as there are types of farmers out there. And so the type of, I would say, spend as much time as you can learning how to farm on somebody else's dime, basically, before taking the jump into owning your own farm business if you don't already. Learning from experienced mentors in your community is one of the best, most efficient ways to get started. Certainly, leasing through the land trust is a great option if you're on the east end of Long Island, for sure. And to that end, basically, land access is a huge issue that that farmers of all ages are having to contend with, not just here on the east end, but all over the Northeast, all over the country, really, but especially in the Northeast and then on the West Coast specifically. So take a look, depending on where, whoever asked this question, depending on where you are located, definitely look around for resources from your local extension agency, and any local land trusts or land conservation organizations in your area will be able to point you in the right direction as far as getting your feet on a piece of land. And good luck.
We got a question, an information on USDA's Food Hub Guide from Joe. So we'll when we send out this this recording, we'll include that resource for people who want to learn more about food hubs and what they are and where they are and what they do.
And there's a shout out on here to the Sang Lees. I'm assuming they mean Sang Lee Farms, for the terrific job they did very early on for online ordering and car side pickup. That's very nice.
Well, I was just going to ask, when you jumped in at the beginning, you started talking really about how you guys were adapting to the pandemic. Maybe you could just give a little bit about the farm, you and the farm, so like people know.
Sorry about that. Sure. Sang Lee is a diversified, certified organic vegetable farm. And we like to consider that we grow 100 different varieties of things on about 100 acres. We only own 25% of the land. So we do lease a large portion of what's required in order to grow all the food that we provide for people. We do weigh very heavily on people like donors who make donations to Peconic Land Trust. We do rely on people who have land, who are willing to lease it for vegetable production rather than for sod farming or another topsoil removing form of agriculture like nursery stock. And these people will pay, as much, if not more in some cases, to lease that farmland and remove the topsoil. So I feel thankful that there are people who are actively, being conservationists and environmentalists who are willing to lease land or donate land, or do a subdivision, a conservation subdivision in Southwold Town and preserve farmland. I sit on the Southwold Town Land Preservation Committee, and it's really nice to see when people make the decision to preserve their farm and put an easement on the land, and then have that land available for ag use only in the future. I think that's a really important aspect of support that we see from our local community, and it enhances the heritage here in Southall. So it's really nice to see those things. But back to Sangley, basically 100 varieties on 100 acres, all certified organic. We do have some land that's in transition. We do not produce food on that property. But part of our mission is to constantly try new things and new varieties. This year, we're growing persimmon and figs, and we continued experimenting with different types of berries. And we're moving into more perennial crops on the home property and expanding into larger production and transplanting with different types of strategies like no-till. This afternoon, we were harvesting cauliflower from a very late planted no-till, strip-tilled, drip line irrigated cauliflower planting, which we had our fingers crossed. We had no idea whether or not it was going to produce. And we took the last 10 flats of cauliflower, and instead of planting them in 3-line format, in a tight, ordinance out in the field, we put them in single file line. We took up 6 feet of row space, and we made a gamble. And ultimately, if you look at that land in a month or two, in the dead of the winter, there's rye and vetch, and there's a really nice ground cover in and around those plants. And so I said to the guys today while we were harvesting, I said, it may not be bigger cauliflower, but it's certainly better for the soil. And ultimately, this part of the farm will benefit for next year because we did this no-till trial. And so constantly at Sangley, we're doing those things to increase our efforts to preserve the topsoil and to take care of the land. And I think a lot of people can see that ultimately we're willing to do things the right way, and we're willing to trial things in an environmentally friendly manner, even if it costs us more manpower, more labor, or affects our profits or the size of our product or something like that. And so that's a mission that we like to steadfast to. And I think that's part of the reason why we were selected by Ag and Markets to be one of the first to win the Loophole Conservation Award. I hope that's enough history and then future.
Could I ask a naive question? Is it true that, speaking of frost tonight, is it true that a frost sweetens cauliflower and broccoli, the cruciferous vegetables?
Depending on the temperature, yes, but it's really dependent on a lot of environmental conditions: humidity, soil temperature, whether or not the wind is there, how big the plant is, at what age of maturity it's standing in the field, what else is around it. Is there a big canopy of 20 rows, or is this a single row out in the middle of the field? There's so many factors that go into it. It's hard to say that a certain temperature in a certain region or zone is going to produce certain results, because just like everybody's dietary tract or everybody's emotions, there's a sliding scale for the weather that is not reconcilable on paper. You can't just put a temperature rating on tonight's frost and have it be a blanket statement. It's going to be different at all 3 of our farms, and it'll be different in all 4 of our fields. So it's hard to say, but the chemistry behind sweetening of cruciferous crops basically is that the plant will take up proteins from the soil and it'll turn them into sugars inside the plant cell wall. And so kale can be sweetened, Brussels sprouts sweetened, broccoli, cauliflower, yes, sweetened, but it's very dependent on a specific set of conditions in the environment. And so there is no single answer for that question.
Aha.
So not naive, but very specific.
Just from a cook's perspective, and I've always heard Long Island is famous for cauliflower, and that, you know, once there's a frost, it all of a sudden becomes sweeter. And that's
Sure.
probably an old farmer's almanac. Yes, Layton.
Go ahead, Layton.
I would just add that varieties also really have a lot to do with it, because a lot of the flavor profile that you're tasting when you eat your midsummer cabbage versus your dead of winter cabbage, a lot of the flavor profile has been selected by breeders, plant breeders in a galaxy far, far away who have decided to, you know, select for different traits. Like maybe that head of cabbage won't split in the field if you leave it until mid-January to pick. Maybe that broccoli is gonna hold that nice tight beaded head longer in the field than the next. So all of those things also have consequence for not only how well they survive or hold in the field or last on their way to the end consumer, but also how they taste and how they look. And, you know, fascinating, you know, starches to sugars kind of example is the lowly parsnip, which we seed in March in Amagansett, and we'll wait until probably December or something to pick them, because while you can pick them as early as September, you know, on paper they're ready to pick in September, you wait until they've experienced a few of those hard frosts, because they are a crop that flower in their second year. And in order to have the reserves of energy to flower and produce as many seeds as that plant can possibly produce, it's going to convert all of those starches in the roots into sugars as to become its own little like lunchbox for the plant for the next year, assuming that it survives the winter, to then go on and flower and fruit, because sugar is energy, right? So that's another function, not the cruciferous families per se, but a lot of the roots that we enjoy through the winter.
Any more questions?
No more questions for the, so I'm just going to ask another, maybe naive, but this question about Brussels sprouts. So as a child of the 60s and the 70s, I hated Brussels sprouts. And now I love them. I heard this rumor or a story that Brussels sprouts have changed in terms of how they're grown or their flavor. Is that true, or?
I think people have learned how to cook them, but I'm going to let the farmers answer this.
I'll just say quickly that I think that family of vegetables, it makes a huge difference how fresh it is when you eat it. You know, a Brussels sprout that's been sitting in a truck, you know, maybe it was picked out in Watsonville, California, and then picked into a bin and then put on a freight train or on a plane, if of all things. And then you're eating it 10 days, 2 weeks after it was harvested. It's going to taste nothing like the, you know, maybe it tasted amazing on the day that it was picked, but the flavor is so different. And that's why it's so important to eat locally. It's just, not only is the food more flavorful, but it actually is more nutritious actually if you eat fresh food. So that's my take. But I also wasn't alive in the 60s and 70s, so I can't vouch for that.
It's possible that it was that you ate food from a faraway place. It's also possible that variety and, you know, plant breeders, like Layton suggested, have done their due diligence and chosen the sweeter types. Or maybe you're just eating it at a different part, you know, of the season. So to answer your question and Laura's in a combination, there are certain points in time during the season where each crop is going to taste better. Broccoli is going to be great from October to Christmas. Cauliflower is going to be amazing in November. And there are just certain times that Brussels sprouts are going to perform well. And they're going to taste sweeter after a certain set of environmental conditions have come into play, and then they're harvested. And you may just be around those environmental conditions to consume that vegetable more often now than you were in the past. And so I would say, you know, being that you live on Long Island, I think that you have access to some of the best food, especially those fall cruciferous and fall brassicas. We also do have a really amazing underground aquifer, and perhaps you were eating Brussels sprouts that were grown with, where we're growing Brussels sprouts with purified drinking water. So I do believe that Long Island has the environmental conditions and the quality to grow some of the best vegetables, but maybe I'm just exposed to that, being that they're so fresh.
Thanks. Laura, there's one more question. Do you want to ask it? And then maybe we'll wrap up with this question.
Sure. Hold on one second. Let me find that. I assume it's down here at the bottom.
Mhm.
Okay. When is the best on the South Fork to begin hardening off tomato and pepper seedlings outdoors? When can they be planted outdoors? So I'm guessing he's saying, when is the best time on the South Fork to begin hardening off tomato and pepper seedlings outdoors? When can they be planted outdoors?
Oh, so I guess I'm the South Fork person in the group. I gotta tell you, this was a really tricky year for us. We, most of us will remember that awful late freeze that we got in May of this year. So in our zone, I think we're zone 7B. Is that right, Will?
Mm-hmm.
7B and Chris. Usually we're able to get away without a frost after April 15. The main trick with tomatoes and peppers is that peppers especially, you want them to be good and big, and they really don't like temps below. I think you can get away with high 40s, but they really don't like it. But you can start that hardening off process in late April, I would say earliest. Same with tomatoes. And then rule of thumb for us, at least on the South Fork, is, earliest tomatoes can go in, or home gardeners will say Memorial Day for your earliest tomatoes. I think we got our first planting of tomatoes in like the first week in May this year. But then again, you get that freeze warning and you're out there with the hoops and the remay and, just praying that it didn't all blow away, which it did. So I would just put a plug in to say, climate is not getting more predictable or easier to work with. And, but yeah, I would say for tomatoes and end of May, and peppers, you can get away with around the same time, even edging into the middle of May for both of those crops.
Yep, I would agree. Pay a close attention to the moon cycle and keep your eye on the weather that's predicted for late April, early May.
Well, I think with that, I think we're going to wrap up. We're about almost 20 after 7. So this was a great conversation. Laura, I'll throw it to you if you have any, if you want to say anything, or, but
I want to give a shout out to Browder's Birds, the best chickens in the world. I want to know what kind of persimmons they're growing at Sangley. I want to know if Layton's growing Chimayo peppers. I have a gazillion. Oh, look, there's another question. Nope, it's a thank you. Even better. I mean, I could just go on and on. But people have lives.
So we'll have to continue this conversation. So,
yes. Can I ask Will quickly what kind of persimmons you're growing?
I'll have to look at the nursery stock, the root stock. I'll shoot it over to you in email.
Okay.
Don't be on the edge of your seat because they do take a few years to establish. So
yes,
the best time to plant a tree is 10 years ago. The second tree is right now. And they also say that he who plants a tree not expecting to sit in the shade understands the meaning of life. So we're planting trees and trying to take care of the land.
Everybody's doing a good job too. Grateful to all of you. And it's been a strange season, but things are going to get better. So.
Yeah.
So I say.
Well,
Thank you for having us. Thank you for
Mhm.
hosting this.
thank you all for spending
you.
time, both to the panelists, Chris, Layton, and Will, to Laura for moderating, to our audience for, being with us on this cold, early winter, late fall evening. And I thank you all. I wish you all good health and a very safe and healthy holiday season up ahead. And just a reminder, we'll be posting this conversation on our website in the next few days. So if you want to check it out, and we'll send around a reminder. I'll post that information on the USDA's Food Hub as well. And keep an eye out, because we'll be doing more conversations in the new year. So including one on changing tides in marine farming, the living shoreline, and cultivating nature's diversity in your backyard. So that's upcoming in the new year for us. And also, we're doing a virtual open house for the Land Trust on December 11th at 4 p.m. So information's on our website. Check out our calendar for upcoming programs, and hope to see you there. And otherwise, I wish you all a good evening and much thanks.